Deion Sanders Jr. has hilarious 7-word message for Shedeur after getting frustrated with Brown's QB. For months, the label followed him everywhere, whispered in broadcast booths, typed aggressively into comment sections, and carried like a verdict that had already been decided. Draft failure. It clung to Shedeur Sanders from the moment he arrived in Cleveland, buried on the depth chart and treated less like a quarterback of the future and more like a curiosity. A name that carried more noise than opportunity. By the time week 14 arrived, that narrative felt cemented, reinforced by losses, limited snaps, and a Browns season spiraling toward another forgettable finish. And then, against the Tennessee Titans, even in defeat, Shedeur Sanders did the one thing that has always defined him. He responded. 3 touchdown passes later, the conversation shifted. Not completely, not cleanly, but unmistakably. For the first time since draft night, Sanders looked less like a punchline and more like a reminder. A reminder of why he had been talked about so loudly in the first place, why his confidence had always unsettled people, and why dismissing him so early never quite sat right. The Browns still lost, the record still looked ugly, but something changed in the air around him, and the Sanders family felt it instantly. From that moment forward, the defense of Shedeur Sanders became louder, sharper, and unapologetic. Nobody circles the wagons quite like the Sanders family, and nobody embraces chaos quite like Deion Sanders Jr., better known as Bucky. Support in that family is not quiet or subtle. It is public, humorous, and relentless. But even in support, there is room for frustration, especially when one brother is locked in and the others are left waiting. That dynamic played out recently when Deion Jr. and Shiloh Sanders pulled up to one of Shedeur's Browns sessions, a moment that naturally found its way onto well-off media. Bucky arrived in full endorsement mode, wearing a black Nike hoodie emblazoned with Shedeur's image and the bold declaration, "I'm who they've been looking for." It was a walking billboard of belief, the kind of visual message that leaves no ambiguity about where loyalty lies. At least that was the intention. Because while Shedeur was locked into practice, fully immersed in the grind that now defines his NFL reality, his brothers were stranded on the sidelines with nothing but time, jokes, and a camera. Junior panned the lens toward the empty space around them, pointing out the obvious with comedic timing. "Everybody else over here gone," he said, while Shiloh laughed, the moment perfectly capturing the blend of boredom and brotherhood that only siblings can understand. As the minutes dragged on, so did the commentary. The hoodie, once a symbol of unwavering support, suddenly became the punchline. "I ain't wearing this hoodie no more," Junior joked, the frustration creeping in just enough to feel real, even as the smile betrayed him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was the familiar impatience of someone who showed up to show love and ended up waiting longer than expected. The banter escalated naturally, the way it always does when brothers are involved. Junior finally cracked, unable to keep a straight face as he delivered the line that instantly went viral. "I ain't wearing this stupid *** hoodie no more." 7 words, hilarious, blunt, and unmistakably affectionate beneath the surface. There was no malice in it, no real annoyance, just time to kill, cameras rolling, and a younger brother handling business while the older ones entertained themselves. When Shedeur finally walked over, the scene flipped again. He didn't apologize. He didn't rush. Instead, he reminded them that this was nothing new. This was the same kid who used to wait around after school when rides ran late, patient by necessity, accustomed to trusting that everything would work itself out. It was a subtle moment, easy to miss beneath the jokes, but revealing all the same. Shedeur Sanders has always lived in the space between confidence and patience, between knowing who he is and waiting for the world to catch up. Behind the humor, the bond is unbreakable. When things get uncomfortable, when criticism sharpens, the Sanders brothers do not retreat. They amplify. That loyalty has been most visible during Shedeur's roughest stretches with the Browns, particularly back in October, when a brief, silent, mime-like response to questions about the Dylan Gabriel decision sparked a wave of backlash. Analysts questioned his maturity. Fans questioned his leadership. Social media did what it always does. Deion Jr. answered before the noise could settle. People who blend in trying to teach people who stand out how to blend in, he wrote. Basically, advice on how to be average. It wasn't just a defense. It was a philosophy, a rejection of the idea that conformity should be the goal, especially for someone whose entire career has been built on standing out. Coach Prime, predictably, didn't hesitate to co-sign it. Good one, son. You did that, Deion Sanders said publicly, putting the full weight of his approval behind Shedeur's approach. For better or worse, this is how the Sanders family operates. They do not shrink under criticism. They challenge it head-on. That defiance now sits at the center of Shedeur Sanders' NFL reality. Cleveland's 3-12 record tells one version of the story, but it hardly captures the chaos surrounding the quarterback position. A league-worst 32nd ranked defense, according to PFSN's offense impact metric, has exposed structural problems far beyond any single player. Yet quarterback is where narratives always land, and Sanders' journey has reshaped the tone of the Browns season more than any stat line ever could. Once buried as QB4, barely visible and easy to dismiss, Sanders has climbed steadily, earning the starting role since Week 12 and forcing the organization to confront questions it wasn't ready to ask so soon. Is he a placeholder or a foundation piece? Is his leadership real or manufactured? Is the growth tangible enough to matter? The answers have not been simple. Sanders' development has been uneven, sometimes frustrating, occasionally inspiring. In 1 week, he completed 69% of his passes against Buffalo, displaying poise and rhythm. 2 weeks earlier, he struggled mightily against Chicago, completing just 51.4% and absorbing criticism all over again. The swings have been sharp, the margin for error thin. I'm super appreciative that everything happened how it happened, Sanders said, a comment that sounded less like spin and more like perspective. If I look back from the Ravens game to now, I've improved in experience. It wasn't a declaration of arrival. It was an acknowledgement of process. Head coach Kevin Stefanski has noticed the same thing. He seems to be really taking on that leadership mantle, Stefanski said, a phrase that carries weight in a building that has been searching for quarterback leadership for years. Leadership, however, doesn't erase numbers, and the numbers remain concerning. Over his last 5 games, Sanders owns a 73.7 passer rating, the lowest in the league during that span. He has been sacked 13 times, 6th most in that window, a combination of offensive line breakdowns and his own tendency to extend plays, sometimes too long. The 3-touchdown performance against Tennessee flashed potential, but consistency has remained elusive. Wins haven't followed. And now, with the number 3 overall pick looming, Cleveland stands at yet another familiar crossroads, forced to decide whether Sanders' leadership, resilience, and late-season momentum are enough to justify belief beyond this year. Sanders, for his part, refuses to look ahead. I live in the present, he said. I'm focused on this week because nothing's promised going into next year. It's a grounded answer from a quarterback whose name has rarely existed in grounded conversations. What remains undeniable is that Shedeur Sanders is no longer invisible. The jokes, the hoodies, the sideline waiting, the frustration wrapped in humor, all reflect a family that understands the long game. The narrative that once labeled him a failure no longer fits cleanly. It may resurface, probably will, but for the first time in Cleveland, Shedeur Sanders has something that matters more than noise. He has relevance, and sometimes that's where everything starts.